Production funding is provided by A. Reddix & Associates, Health Information Resource Center, offering short-term training for long-term professional careers in medical coding. HIRCVA.net.
Discussing the issues and celebrating the successes of the African American community. This is Another View.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Another View. I'm Barbara Ham Lee. On May 16th, right here on WHRO, American Experience will present Freedom Riders, a 2-hour documentary on the historic rides from Washington, D.C. to New Orleans. Blacks and whites together, beaten, spit upon, yet determined to challenge Jim Crow laws in the South. Now, it's been 50 years since these brave men and women shook up America and moved the civil rights movement to a new level. Tonight, we'll show you parts of the documentary, and we'll talk with our very special guest, Dr. Valda Montgomery, author of Just a Neighbor, who was 13 years old when the Freedom Riders came to her home in Alabama. Welcome to the program, Dr. Montgomery.
Thank you. That's all right. That's fine. That's fine.
I know your last name was Harris at the time.
It was.
Absolutely. Now, before we get into the discussion about how your home, your family played such a critical part in the history of the civil rights movement, let's take a look at part of the documentary from Freedom Riders.
As we entered the city limits of Anniston, we could see the bus station. Looked like at least 200 people were around the bus station, all men.
They were calling us all kind of names, nigger lovers, communists. Come on out and integrate Alabama. We dare you to do this, we dare you to do that.
The men began to come closer and surround the bus completely. They were saying, let's kill these niggers on this bus and these nigger lovers.
The Anniston clan had it all worked out. They had one of their members lie down in front of the bus. They were puncturing tires, they were breaking windows. They wanted to make sure that bus couldn't leave before they could surround it and do whatever they wanted to do.
The bus may have been there for 10 or 15 minutes. To us, it seemed like an hour. Another bus driver was able to ease the bus through the crowd.
At first, there was a feeling of relief because we were getting away there, we thought. But this car that was in front of us kept dodging from side to side to keep the bus from getting by.
I spoke to an innocent passenger who was sitting there and said, "I'm sorry I got you into this." And he said, "So am I."
Eventually we heard that sickening sound of tires going flat.
There was a commotion outside, so I walked to the front of the store to see if I could tell what was going on. The bus driver came out, and he went out to look at the tires, and when he realized how flat and hopeless they were, he just walked away from the bus and just left all the passengers to fend for themselves. He just walked away.
We were now in the hands of this mob. It didn't look good for us.
I'm like everyone else on the bus. I'm pretty afraid, okay? That's putting it mildly.
I watched as a man raised his arm above the crowd with a crowbar, and he broke out one of the back windows of the bus.
You could hear him say, throw it in, and asking, where is the gas, where is the gas?
The hand went down, and when it came back up, it had some object in it that he threw into that hole.
And there was immediate flash fire on the bus.
Pretty soon the whole back of the bus was black. You couldn't even see in front of your face.
So I ran up to the front of the bus and I tried to open the door, Only thing I could hear is, let's burn them niggers. Let's burn them niggers alive. At that moment, the fuel tank exploded. I heard somebody say, it's gonna go, it's gonna go. And they ran, and that was the only way we could get that door open.
The door burst open and people just spilled out into the yard. They were practically tripping over each other because they were so sick and they needed to get some air.
I can't tell you if I walked off the bus or if I crawled off or someone pulled me off.
When I got off the bus, a man came up to me, and I'm coughing and strangling. He said, boy, you all right? And I nodded my head, and the next thing I knew, I was on the ground. He had hit me with part of a baseball bat.
I mean, just watching it, it gives you chills. But you were 13 years old when this was going on, and this was outside of Birmingham. Had the news gotten to Montgomery in terms of what was happening?
Not that I know of, because I don't recall hearing about Freedom Riders at all, or any kind of problems that were going on even in the state of Alabama. So I really can't say, because we were going about normal routine, going to school in May. So I can't say that.
So your family kind of kept you all, as the children of the Harris family, as normal as possible.
Right.
But really, your house was a pretty famous place in terms of the whole civil rights movement.
Yes, yes.
Tell us about where you lived and why that came about.
Well, the area that we lived is called Sentinel Hill in Montgomery, and it was primarily an area of prominent black professional people. Ergo, the parsonage for Dexter Avenue Baptist Church, the minister lived there, so the house was there. The parsonage, which was the home, was 2 doors down from us, so whoever was assigned to be the minister of Dexter, of course, lived in the house. Reverend Johns was one of those that I remember, he and his family. And then, of course, the next family to move in as minister was the King family. So they were neighbors of ours for 6 years, from 1954 until they moved to Atlanta in 1960.
So Dr. King and Coretta King were your neighbors.
Right.
That they had their first child yet?
They did not have the first child when they came, because they had just gotten married, and she was born in November of 55. And when I think about it now, and as an adult, and really thinking about these issues, it dawned on me that she was born November, I believe it's November the 17th of 55. And then 2 weeks later, the Montgomery bus boycott set off, okay? So she was only 2 weeks old at that time, and then when the bombings occurred for their house, of course, being 2 doors down, we felt repercussions as well, broken glass and things of that nature. And I also think about the fact that my mother was pregnant at that time, because my youngest brother was born that July. You know, you don't think about that until you really start, quote, doing the math and figuring these things out.
Now, as far as the civil rights movement, I mean, Montgomery had the bus boycott, then the Freedom Riders, and then the Selma to Montgomery March. So there was a lot going on in terms of civil rights. Dr. King was your neighbor. Right. You went back and forth when their home was bombed. What do you remember about that night?
Oh, that night I do remember. My mother was next door. She was a college student at the time. She went to school after, late in life, let's say, after she had most of her children. And she was using a set of encyclopedias from the young ladies that were next door. They were school teachers. And we were, of course, next door, and you didn't have to have a babysitter sitting there at that time. But we remember hearing this loud boom, this loud explosion. And, of course, being children, you're nosy, and you want to run to the front door, and she ran out to the house to tell us to get back into the house. And so, of course, we were peeking out of the door, and she came home, but she went out on the porch so that she could see what was going on. And you had the people that were coming from the neighborhood with weapons, because they had bombed his house and they were ready for revenge. It had gotten into a vindictive state. He was not there, and neither was my father. He was at work, and Reverend King was, I believe, at one of the churches with a mass meeting when he got the message to come home. But she said that she remembers him going to the front porch and calming the crowd. Now, she vividly remembers that. We, of course, don't remember hearing his words because we were inside, but we could peek outside and see the crowd, because at that time I was 8 and my sister was 9, and my younger brother at that time would have been 5 years old.
So your father and your grandfather, they were both pharmacists?
No, my grandfather was not. He was a businessman, but he owned the drugstore.
Okay.
And hired a pharmacist. And then my dad decided, and worked in the drugstore as well, but my dad decided that all the money was going to pay a pharmacist, so he said, I'm going back to pharmacy school and I'll do the whole shebang, be the pharmacist and the owner. And that's what he did.
So did they talk to you about what was happening in terms of blacks fighting for their rights, in terms of the turmoil that was starting to happen?
There was just, that was everyday occurrence, everyday life. And as I said, all my memories are very childlike, and I don't remember feeling afraid. I remember the unity. If anything, I remember that one word. Everybody was so unified. You never felt afraid during those times at all, because the mere fact of your being black, it didn't matter the socioeconomic status of a person. They protected you no matter where you were. You had support. You had support. But no, nobody ever mentioned that, other than with the boycott when it was going on. I remember hearing the adults say, "Don't get on the bus. Don't get on the bus." And then the bus came right past our home, and neighbors were on the porches, so were Mom and Daddy and the rest of us, watching to see if the bus was going to be vacant. And they cheered when they saw that no one was riding the bus. I really didn't know what that meant, but I cheered too. You know, that you're great. And we remembered my father telling us, when we get a chance to ride the bus, you sit right behind the driver. I mean, you sit so close to the driver you could drive the bus. And I have a tendency to still do that today.
To this day, it rubbed off on you.
Right.
I want to show another clip from the documentary, but this is as the Freedom Riders get to Montgomery, and they're beaten really badly.
Right.
And there's a big church meeting, I guess at Dexter Avenue.
No, First Baptist.
At First Baptist. Okay. 1,500 people in the church, and they were unable to leave because there were crowds and crowds and crowds of people kind of daring them to come out. Eventually, they do get out, and the Freedom Riders actually go to your home. Let's show the clip, and then we'll find out what happens after that.
The 17 Freedom Riders who were at last night's church service have disappeared within the city of Montgomery or in the surrounding countryside. There is no sign of them, no one who will admit that he has any knowledge of their whereabouts. They were expected to surrender to local authorities today to face charges of having violated an injunction against integrating buses operating on Alabama highways. They have not surrendered.
After the siege, the Freedom Riders gathered at Dr. Harris's house. This was one of the largest houses in the black community in Montgomery, and it's an amazing scene. Nothing like it had ever quite happened in the history of the movement before, where you have young and old leaders sort of sequestered in this house, talking about the philosophy of the movement, the strategy, what to do next. And part of this involves the relationship between the riders, between the Freedom Rides and Dr. King.
We met with the students some 4 hours last evening and discussed many matters concerning the whole Freedom Ride and the goals ahead. And it was a unanimous feeling of all of the students present that the Freedom Ride should and must continue.
There were a number of students and riders who wanted Martin King to go on the ride with them. So there were major discussions and a lot of heat, I think, even anger, at Dr. Harris's house during the night and the next day. The folk who were pushing him to go were wanting to use him because he was the spokesperson and symbol of the struggle, and they wanted that to give them some kind of media edge.
he refuses, and he claims that he can't go because he's on probation. And many of these young people are on probation 3 or 4 times over. You know, they've been arrested many more times than he has, and they can't understand this reluctance.
The SNCC kids fully expected that King was going to be on the bus with them to Jackson, Mississippi, and were really crestfallen that he wouldn't. And that's when they started calling him mockingly DeLawd.
To refer to Dr. King, as some people did, DeLawd, was being facetious, sarcastic, that he was bigger than any of us.
When he was explaining why he wouldn't go on the freedom rides, kind of compared himself to Jesus in the sense of seeing himself as a person facing crucifixion. I think he lost a certain amount of stature among some of the students, and I think it fed into some of the splits that would come.
That didn't mean that they turned their backs on him by any means. He's still a revered and beloved figure, but he was revealed to have feet, well, maybe of clay.
So this was the first time you've seen this. You recognize those pictures?
Yes, I do. It brings back so many memories. All of that was in what we call the playroom upstairs, which was a large, it still is, a very large room. And at the time, the house was just remodeled in '59 to be as large as it was, with a lot of recreational areas. So it wasn't fully furnished. So it allowed itself lend itself very well for people, large amounts of people to be there, because it didn't have a lot of furniture.
So were you hanging around outside
listening
to?
Yeah, you were just in the house. We were in the house, and looking at these pictures, I had no idea. This is really my first time looking at those pictures to see that all of this was going on. I had no idea that there was actually video footage of that going on. We had Life magazine photographers there. I do remember that. And
so what was it like talking to the Freedom Riders when you talked to them? I know you were 13. You thought they were cute.
Oh yeah, they were really cute, because I was just beginning to like boys, and they were college students and looked real good. And they talked to us as if we were, the children of the family, just very protective. I don't recall them showing any signs of fear, although I'm sure that they did. I know that in the 45th anniversary, 5 years ago, they came to Montgomery, and John Lewis came in the house, and he was just teary, very teary-eyed, because it meant so much. And several of them came back and just said, I just want to go to that room. I just need to go to that room. Here again, I don't want it to sound flippant. It's just that I just had no idea that it meant that much to them until now, seeing that the footage.
So how do you feel now, knowing that you were right in the midst of what would turn this country upside down?
I feel proud, very proud, for my family, for my mother and my father. I think of the courageous act that they must have agreed to, or must have done, or whatever the case may be. When I think about it, being a grown person, I don't know if I could put my children in harm's way, and in a sense that's what they did. When you think about the violence from First Baptist, that violence could very easily have carried over to the house, so it wasn't like an obscure place. It was right on the road, you're right in the street, so you could find it. But I feel extremely proud to be a part of it, and I try my best to keep my memories as childlike as possible so that I can present, quote, another view, different perspective of the movement at that time.
Do you ever keep in touch with any of them?
I see the rider with John Lewis. We see when he comes to town. They wrote Mama several letters when they went to Jackson and were in the Hinds County Jail. We do have some of those letters. One I did put in the book. The others I couldn't fit. But when they came for the 45th, yes. Bernard Lafayette was in Tuskegee. I don't know if he's still in Tuskegee, and Diane Nash as well. When they come to town, they try to call or try to get in touch with her.
I sure hate to cut this conversation,
That's
but we have a little bit of another story we need to tell. But your book is Just a Neighbor.
That's correct.
And it's all about the experiences that you had then. And we thank you so much for being with us and to share with us your stories here. This is incredible. And hopefully everybody will watch the documentary on Monday and get your book too.
Okay, thank you very much.
And when we come back, the Freedom Ride comes alive as one student from Newport News retraces history with some of the original Freedom Riders. But first, here's what's happening in Hampton Roads. As part of the commemoration of the 50th anniversary of the Freedom Riders, 40 college students from across the country were selected to retrace the original routes along with surviving Freedom Riders. One of the selected students was born here in Newport News, but moved around as a military brat. Collis Cruz is now a junior at North Carolina A&T State University, and he shares his thoughts on civil rights and the Freedom Riders.
Collis Cruz grew up hearing stories about the things his family encountered living in Mississippi in the early 1960s.
My grandmother is also from Mississippi too, and she lives with us today, and she always tells me about how there was so much oppression down in that area. And my great-grandfather also, who finally saw the day, which he thought would never come, that a white man would come and acknowledge him as a man by handing him his change in his hand. Because before that, before integration and all that stuff, well, the white clerk in the store would just probably put the change on the counter and just have him pick it up.
These people are going from town to town and getting off the bus and seeking through mixed groups, Negro men and white women, to force themselves into situations which tend to inflame the local people.
He describes the hatred the Freedom Riders encountered as horrible.
When they were attacked by Bull Connor, the burning of the buses and stuff like that, just looking at footage, not just pictures, but like actual footage, I mean, they held their ground. They held their ground really well. They did it all in peaceful. It was all peaceful. They didn't resist or anything when they got arrested. They just went on, got cuffed, and they went in the car, in police cars. No fussing or fighting or arguments or anything. It was just all peaceful protests. And really, there was no reason for all that extra violence to go on.
It was an essay that netted the Newport News native a place on the bus with the other 40 student riders who are now retracing the historic route.
We have assignments, given assignments on the trip, whether it's journal entry, video blogging. I've been asked by Greensboro News and Record to write a couple pieces for them to publish. And I've also been asked by my history department to just keep a personal diary. I'm going to be doing a lot of writing on this trip. Sometimes I think, just from seeing all those beatings and burnings of the buses and stuff like that, what's going to happen to us? Are we gonna like kind of reenact the whole thing, or are we just gonna take the route? Like, is it gonna be like some type of mock beatings or stuff like that? I don't know.
Cruz says had he lived back then, he too would have laid his life on the line for civil rights.
I feel that our generation today, I think our generation really doesn't have that willpower to fight for anything, because we feel that, I guess we feel that we feel that like we're satisfied, kind of, sort of, and we also have it's like we don't have anything to fight for anymore because everything is pretty much there at our disposal. I would put my life on the line because it was very important to us, because of my family, because they went through, they were there. They've seen segregation, they lived through segregation, and my great-grandfather, who passed away 8 years ago, if he was still alive today, I know he would be very proud that I'm participating in something like this.
And if you would like to continue to follow Collis and his journey, visit our website, WHRO.org, and click on Freedom Riders. The documentary Freedom Riders airs on WHRO Monday, May 16th from 9 to 11 p.m. The Virginia Beach NAACP, along with Hebron Cornerstone Church International, will host a community viewing party and town hall meeting on that Monday from 8 to 11. It's at the church, 5565 Virginia Beach Boulevard, and you can call 757-518-1122 for more information. It's a chance to watch this critical part of history as a community. And we thank you for joining us this evening. Give us some feedback, become a fan on Facebook, or send us a note on our website, anotherview.tv. Next week, restoring the rights of ex-offenders. We'll see you next time for Another View.
Production funding is provided by A. Reddix and Associates, Health Information Resource Center, offering short-term training for long-term professional careers in medical coding. HIRCVA.net.